Welcome back to Inauguration Day Special here on Arise News. Joining us now to anchor this segment is our colleague, Adesua Omorua.
Good afternoon, good morning, thanks for having me.
Well, it's time now to move on to other issues, economic policy, infrastructure, education, and human capital. And to help us bring some perspective to this, we have in the studio with us Professor Utomi, who is a political economist, social communicator, and a former presidential advisor, together with the economist Ishmeal Balogun. Prof. Ishmeal, you're welcome to Inauguration Day Special. And you've been in the studio for a while. We saw the president arriving with his wife, Mrs. Aisha Buhari, and chieftains of the All Progressives Congress all over the place, the security establishment, other stakeholders. It looks like quite a colorful ceremony in a way. But I would like to start with economic policy, setting an agenda for President Buhari in the next 4 years. Earlier on this program, we talked about organized private sector, setting agenda for President Buhari for the next 4 years. And both of you are big players in the economic, in the private sector. I mean, Prof is a boardroom guru. Ishmeal Balogun, you have been president of the Nigerian-Indonesian Chamber of Commerce. Now, what kind of direction would the two of you like to see in terms of key policies, even beyond the promises that have been made on the monetary side by the governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria? Prof, I'll start with you.
Well, you know, this is a subject that I approach with a lot of caution these days because I think that there is need for a complete rethink of economic development in Nigeria. If there is anything that is clear, it is that Nigeria is in deep, deep trouble. There's unemployment everywhere. If there's unemployment at the kind of levels we are talking about, what is happening around the country with violence and everything, just a matter of time, it's inevitable, it just goes that way. Because people lose their sense of self-worth, their dignity, and they begin to do desperate things. We know what it has done in the healthcare space. Recently, the spate of writings about suicides and mental health challenges, all these are related to the economic well-being of the people. How do we really begin to rethink the economy to make it grow rapidly? The trouble is that for too long, this has been a rent economy. The most prosperous people in Nigeria who go out with a swagger add very little value, from bankers to all of them. You know, they're all just connection points in rent extraction. No economy really is sustainable until it produces. And the Nigerian economy produces. You cannot do it without a strategy. It has to be a clear strategy. I keep talking about the absence of national strategy, and we talk about all these things we've had, these meetings. But it does not, when you have a national strategy, that strategy affects choice that people make around investment. It's investors who come in based on the clarity of your national strategy that leads to growth. We are so taken up because of the experience with oil revenues that we think only in terms of fiscal transfers. You get so much money from the federation account, you do so much with it. How much is the budget of Nigeria to make for any real growth and development? The investments that will drive growth will come from the private sector. And there is abundance of capital in the world. But capital only goes where it believes that it is safe, where it believes that it will get a fair return, and that is what then leads to growth and development. The obsession with revenues as against production is really the central story of why the Nigerian economy is on lockdown, not going anywhere. So we must get into this business of how do we unlock that? How do we make for the investments that will lead to growth and development? Until we can do that, really, we're all dressed up with nowhere to go.
Mr. Balogun?
Yeah, Professor, of course, going from where you stopped, for me, when we're talking about the economic policies, It's so much we've seen over the years, and it keeps coming back and forth with no realistic results. So I would want to see an economic policy or policies that would really, really address the situations we're facing in this country. We are crying about jobs. People want to be employed. People want to be creative. And the rate of joblessness is still astounding. We're talking about infrastructure. We're talking about power. We're talking about the things that would affect the lives of every single Nigerian, not just the ones that are privileged, but every single one. If we're saying that we're having increased GDP, how does it trickle down to the regular man on the street, to the regular woman that's trying to make ends meet? So for me, I'm very practical. I'm talking about how do we begin to industrialize this nation? How do we begin to create jobs? How do we balance agriculture with manufacturing? How do we make sure that we're not just thinking about oil and gas and the revenue that's generated from it? How do we expand and diversify the economy and the policies that will sustain those things?
Mr. Ishmeal, you have raised a lot of how. How do we do this? How do we move it? Professor Utomi, you talked about lack of strategic policy, but this administration and this government will argue with you that there's the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan. Don't you think that is visible enough? But, you know, the president raised an issue that got a lot of people talking after his re-election. He says there will be tough times ahead. That was one position reiterated by the CBN governor after his reappointment recently. He says there will also be tough times ahead. What sort of tough decisions should we be taking, and the structural changes needed to put the economic, running and in good shape? Let me start with you, Prof, because we talked about lack of policy.
All right. Well, some very hard decisions have to be made across the board. And sometimes it's not even in the arena of direct economic policy that economic growth rests. He was talking just before he went off about education. This is so critical to development. If you invest appropriately in education, you can reap a demographic dividend. If you don't invest appropriately there, you can harvest anarchy, the kinds of troubles that we are having now. One clear area we have to make choices is about primary education. You know, we always go to university. If there is no base, it's garbage in, garbage out at the tertiary level. And right now, one of the things that we amuse ourselves with is this belief that there's capacity. We don't have capacity in Nigeria. Really, if we want to do many things well, we'll have to bring from abroad. Do we get Nigerian diaspora to begin to come back, or do we go and bring foreigners? But the truth is that capacity isn't there to drive serious policies. You go to the public service that can work a partnership. I mean, Japan is what it is because of a ministry called the Ministry of International Trade and Industry. They literally drove the industrialization and foreign expansion of Japan. But any encounter with the public service, permanent secretary and 3-4 people probably work. Everybody else thinks this is just where to go and collect salary and then spend more of their time selling bags and whatever it is they're doing. We need a complete, retraining of people to be able to work in the system so that we can have economic growth. For 50 years, all we have done is collect these revenues from oil, keep people on some jobs with the revenues we are getting, and we're not creating the necessary conditions for entrepreneurship that will create. Okay, a number of things have been done lately, but in many ways these are band-aids to what is a big saw. And it's not working. That is the truth. We don't have the level of passion and commitment. Champions who are saying, my life depends on this level of economic growth and that, from these kinds of, what is it clear? When you're talking about ERP, I've talked about ERP, economic GP before. It's a good vehicle, a good tool for implementation. It is not a strategy. It does not say where we're going. The kind of strategy that I would like to see is one that says, look at our factor endowments. Okay, in this part of the country, this gum arabic is a major endowment. how do we create value chains from that endowment into the global markets? Train people to go in and play different kinds of roles in taking gum arabic to chemicals to markets around the world. That's how we grow an economy. Do we use industrial policy to support these specific value chains? I mean, the big discussions that have gone on, the two fellows have gone after each other on this. The South Korean, who's a professor of economics at Cambridge, Chang, who wrote the book Bad Samaritans. You know, that broad industrial policy, protect industry so that they can grow behind diseases. Well, the Chinese, interestingly, economists says, wait a minute, you can't do that kind of broad, which is my own argument for years. You just have permanent infant industries. But you can take specific endowments where you have latent comparative advantage. Use industrial policy to support that particular area to grow rapidly so you can grow the economy. So we need to have strategies like that and sell it to the world, literally do road shows. Show the world that there's rule of law in Nigeria. If you're an investor right now, you want to come to Nigeria.
Prof and Ishmeal Balogun, you've also been watching the ceremonies with us. What's your take? What do you think?
It's a colorful event. Democracy is moving in the right direction. But when you start to ask yourself the real questions, so we're in democracy, am I enjoying the dividends of democracy? Has it affected my business positively? Has it affected my family positively? Am I employing more people at my office? Or am I laying people off? Are people calling you more now for more loans and handouts than ever before? The state of security. So you start to wonder that, democracy seems to be alive, but are we really feeling the dividends of democracy? And that's a question for me that I've not been able to answer, because the reality is that Nigeria is not where we want it to be. And that is a problem for any concerned citizens. And like Prof was saying, and back to the discussion, we're talking about economic policies. And they go on forever, and there's so much acronyms and nomenclatures and all these things. But the practicality is that we want a country that could be self-sufficient. We want to increase our manufacturing base. We want to make sure that children are in school. We're talking about close to 12 million children that are not in school as we speak. Pakistan is next after us, 5 million children out of school. We all know that without education, there is no development. Without education, there is no future. Likewise, without light, there is no development. So you start to realize that why have a 10-point agenda if we can just probably limit it to 2? Give me light and let me show you what I can do with light. Let's start to power up these industries. Let's start, you ask a tailor to sew you a piece of fabric. They're charging you 5,000 naira, not because that's the cost. It's going to have to pay for gen, it's going to have to... But really, it should take a day, and maybe the charge is 2,000 naira. And that's just your tailor. The same thing happens with your mechanic. And you have that holistic effect all around you. At the end of the day, you're paying, but you're not receiving value for what you pay for, because the infrastructure is deficient. And so for me, it's about the practicality of identify what our priorities are. Forget about the acronyms. Let's sit down as Nigerians, get the right, the round pegs in the round holes, get the square ones in the square, and let's begin to look at it critically and say, you know what, every other country that's done it, human beings did it. They didn't have to go to Mars to create these solutions. And there's no problem that we have today that's only identical to Nigeria. Singaporeans, the Americans, Malaysia, they've done it. They've been the Indians. So we're not even talking about you're the most innovative. Can we look at copy and paste as a way forward? Because for me, if it's not happened before, then it's unique. But these are problems that have been solved prior to now. So can we just be realistic and look at solutions that has worked and then transfer them and adapting our local solutions to make it work.
And these are not insurmountable problems.
Absolutely.
What is it that you would hear from the president, either later today in his inaugural speech or at some other point, that would give you an indication that he is prioritizing economic recovery?
So thank you so much for that question. I want to see or hear from the president exactly how do we begin to improve power supply, like a practical solution. I know it's a lot of work that's involved from generation to distribution but like someone said earlier this morning, we were forewarned that there's going to be hard days ahead. But I take you back to 2015. If you remember clearly, we were told the same thing. So 4 years ago, you're told the same thing, and that same rhetoric is happening over again. So, see, for me, my background, we've set up industries in Nigeria, and I've seen the desire of Nigerians to want to create jobs, despite all the infrastructural problems, despite of the human resources problem, despite the multiple taxation. You have people that have the pure desire to do something positive. The role of the government is to create an enabling environment. So give me practical examples on how you intend to do this. We're generating maybe about 5,000 megawatts of power. We all know that's not sufficient. My office, I'm running on diesel. Your home, I'm sure you're running on diesel. I'm sure this office is being run on diesel. That's overhead cost that is dwindling on the revenues of that same company. So you realize you're putting in a lot of work, but you have very little to keep. And that's not sustainable. So that business is only a matter of time before it goes out of business. So I want to hear the president speak about a real tangible proposal on how are we increasing power. Now, if power is increased, watch that affect a manufacturing base speedily, and you will see that grow. We're an import-dependent society. Can we begin to look at being export-oriented? How do we do that? Like Professor said, what are those raw materials that we have at our own disposal? Pump money into that industry, grow it, and let Nigeria be known that we're the #1 exporter of XYZ in the world. It's been done before. It's not rocket science. So for me, that's what I would want to hear from the government. A practical solution to bringing light in. Let's increase the agricultural base. Forget about subsistence farming. Let's go into commercial farming. Let's grow our industries and watch our foreign reserves start coming in and start growing up. That is what I want to see, something that's practical, something that you feel that this is change, something that would affect your life almost immediately. Not these rhetorics on, oh, we're doing this and we're doing that. It's a lot of MOUs being signed, but how do we take these MOUs and convert them into reality, things we can feel, and that would affect the economy and the GDP of Nigeria?
Well, Prof, let me come to you. I mean, all of this going forward, I think the budget, is part of the roadmap. It's part of the signals. And we've had both the executive and the legislature trading blames about the budget. And only yesterday, the Minister of Budget and National Planning provided a breakdown. If you look at it, you see that already all the fundamentals are upside down. What should we expect in terms of budget performance this year or maybe next year? Infrastructure is at the top of the list in terms of the breakdown. Education is somewhere around number 5 or something. And this infrastructure deficit, how do we solve it in the light of the fact that we're even going to borrow to fund budget deficit?
It comes back to the same point that I was trying to make about where growth and development will come from. It will not come from the budget. The budget gives you a sense of your priorities. Unfortunately, we have not had the political will to face development, let's be honest. I don't know if it was at this or someone of you said, looking at the field or whatever, and said, oh, good optics. And I chuckled inside of me because it captures it for me. When Enron went down, Jeff Skilling was asked, You have this great corporate mission statement, you know. It's actually a book that begins with the corporate mission statement and say, you love it. That was in the 2000 annual report of the Enron Corporation. A few months later, the corporation failed because of the exact opposite of everything that was in its corporate mission statement. We are fantastic in our country in putting up budgets, for example, I don't analyze budgets in Nigeria. I've not done for 20 years. I say it's a waste of any decent person's time. Because the objective of the budget is a public relations exercise. It is not a commitment to a certain trajectory of how you can grow an economy. So people know they have to prepare budgets, so they make a lot of effort. They have this PR thing, but it really is not about where you're going. He talks about power. We know that the problem in power is that we've not had the political will to do the needful. The discos are bankrupt. We know it. We're playing all these games. If you just look at the whole, it's just political will to take the right decision. So when they say optics, I laugh because it is optics where you will know that there is a problem, but you can't take a decision. I laugh because the swearing in this thing says personal interests, and you know decisions are being prevented from taking place because of personal interests. You know the problems. You're looking the problems in the face. You can't take decisions. And you expect things. No. We've got to have a brutal, honest public conversation. Sit around the table like Park used to do in South Korea. And everybody puts down what's the truth of the matter. Look at how much we spent on power. And they were worse today than we were 5 years ago.
The Minister of Power would disagree with you on that.
Yeah, he can disagree. Everybody has the right to hold their own opinions. What I know is that I'm worse in my home.
Or the former minister, since we don't have any cabinet at the moment.
See, it is not whether you've generated 5,000 more. On a per capita basis, Ghana is generating much more anyway. So, to look at where we're going from looking at the budget, for me, it doesn't really tell me any story. We need to say to ourselves, what will bring growth to this economy? What are the problems we're facing now? How can we creatively tackle? Let me give you a simple idea of how people tackle a problem that's before them when they look at resources that are limited. Because, as I keep saying, even if we invested our whole budget in one sector, it won't go anywhere. Budget is small, you know, for our economy. It is how we make it attractive for private capital, whether it's foreign or local, to come in and solve problems. That is the important thing. But how will it happen? When the greatest risk for business in Nigeria is regulatory risk. Government is more likely to kill your business than any market because of the way we manage. You give a Nigerian uniform, he becomes a bully. So, you know, he scares people from areas of enterprise. How do we retrain and reprogram people in public life to understand the connect between the choices they make and growth and development? Those are more critical issues that I want political actors to have political will about and take a position on and strengthen people to then feel confident to go into areas to invest. Because those problems can be solved. We're talking about primary education. This state, Lagos State, if it has to provide the appropriate public schools for all of those children in Makoko, Morocco, and whatever it is, the places are, it would need to increase the budget by two different estimates. One DFID study suggests close to 400 billion a year. Another one comes close to $1 trillion a year. Where's Lagos State going to find that kind of money? But there are small schools in these places that are thriving in 3-4 bedrooms. What do we do to trigger the performance of those schools in different ways so that we can get... That's what the challenge really is, not the challenge of looking at the budget of Lagos. So it's the same thing at the national level.
Well, Mr. Ishmeal, you know, a lot has been said about the ease of doing business in Nigeria, and the President Muhammadu Buhari administration prides itself as one that has improved in that regard. I mean, the Vice President once said that over 140 policies have been implemented just to ease business in Nigeria. But for some people, especially the corporate body, corporate nations, it would be the FDI. And we've seen that decline in recent years. Isn't that the true test of how business-friendly Nigeria is? what is the true state of our corporate image as Nigeria as we start this next 4 years? And we've talked about revenue. If the FDI is dwindling, then we're in trouble. Are we not? Yes.
Interestingly enough, to be practical, we want to commend the current government. I'm very well aware that the NIPC, Nigerian Investment Promotion Commission, prior to about 4 years ago, was just one of those parastatals that wasn't doing much. And I can tell you from our engagement with them, and I know that the office of the vice president did set up the ease of doing business. They have that department, I believe is under the Ministry of Trade, headed by Jumoke Oduwole, if I'm not wrong. And, NIPC, we worked with them, and to share this with you, there's about 27, if I'm not wrong, sub-parastatals underneath of them. You have SON, you have CAC. So the whole idea is, in order to attract foreign direct investment, you want to have a one-stop shop. You've come into NIPC, and so from registering your business to getting the right certifications to talking to you about the ease of doing business, the federal government policy on tax breaks. I think they call it the incentive for businesses that are coming in 3 years tax rebate. So even the businesses that we are speaking with from Indonesia, due to my role as the president of the chamber, a lot of them have been to Nigeria, but they were unaware of the opportunities that is available to them if they are going through the right channel. So I would naturally want to compliment the current government on creating that avenue, letting them know that business can be done. I was also aware that there was a time that business registration, corporate business registrations were being slashed. I think they did a promotion to like 5,000 to register your businesses and all that. That's commendable. But when we talk about the image of the country on the international scale, the truth is it doesn't look great. And I was sitting in the studio this morning, someone mentioned that even in one embassy you have to probably find a bucket to...
Again, that was me. But I want to ask you, yesterday Forbes magazine published an article saying that Nigeria is Africa's money-losing machine. If you want to lose money, put it in Nigeria. And that's a direct quote. And went on in great detail about just what an absolute cesspool Nigeria is for investors on every level, making comparisons to Venezuela. Those of us in Nigeria, we watch the situation in Venezuela and we're like, oh, poor them. But we're being compared to them.
I'm actually writing a book in which I put Nigeria and Venezuela together as development twins. I mean, sadly, very sadly, with all the potential that we have. Again, I will talk about this until I'm blue in the face, because we are our own worst enemies. We are doing this damage to ourselves. It's nothing in the environment, it's us. Venezuela is sitting on the world's biggest reserve of crude oil. And anytime oil prices go down this deep, they can't even, you queue to buy milk, as we used to queue in Nigeria in 1984 to buy milk. Why? Because people who have to make the choices have not made the choices. Did you see the World Bank's recent Human Development Index published? We are 152 out of 157 in the world. Yes. We are a basket case, let's be honest to ourselves. When you agree that that's what you are, then everybody rolls up their sleeve because the possibilities, the potential are all there. Attitude is the biggest problem that's setting the Nigerian economy back. If we agree and then we go out and decide we want to change the way we do business, this country will take off like a rocket, So, but unless we come to terms with that, and we're still, playing ostrich and doing all of that, we'll just be going around in circles and finding some fancy numbers to talk about, and we're still just going around in circles. Look at what has been done in places that look like us and turned around. Brazil is a classic example.
Prof, you wrote recently that there are 3 gangs of actors causing problems in Nigeria. Cultists, soldiers of fortune, 419ers. How do we address that challenge? Because it's not just government. And then Ishmeal Balogun, do you also agree that you have this gangs of actors, this, idolaters, 419ers and, whatever in the private sector? Because you had a Chamber of Commerce. And how do we deal with that challenge? Because it's not just about public sector. We also have private sector challenge. Maybe you go first, before Prof.
See, the story is this. We're a product of our environment. And the minute the foundation is wrong, you start to deal with the consequences of those actions. Cultists didn't just wake up one morning and decide that I'm going to be a cultist or this is the job I aspire to do. I doubt if that is someone's intention when they were given birth to. But you start to look at the realities of your society, You've not, I remember that growing up in this same Lagos, I went to a public school, you understand? And that was because the federal government had made that possible because you can have free education. Now, like Prof said, at the expense of the citizens, you have several private schools that are actually growing, and they are taking advantage of the fact that the government's responsibility to provide basic education is lacking. So there's someone profiting from that. So this whole issue with cultists 419 is a result of the failure of the government, and this is the way these people are reacting. It does not mean it's the right thing to do, but people are looking for a way out. They're looking for a solution. They're looking for anything to put food on their table. And that is why we have this menace of cultism, of 419, of kidnapping, and the general state of insecurity in the society. So the whole idea is, if we're looking for that future that we so desire, you must plant that seed now. There's no magic wand that you're going to wave that will just turn a child that wasn't raised appropriately to just become 18 years old and decide to be a decent member of the society. Those things do not parallel, they do not equal. So if you want to have that desired citizen, you must invest in that same citizen. Provide them with the basic things they need to become a responsible member of the society. That's what I would say in reference to that.
Economics, performance, it's about incentives. And the nature of the incentive system in our country for a long time has encouraged people who don't produce, who can extort either violently or by subterfuge or whatever. And that's why we've had a rise of these kinds of people. We've also made politics attractive as an economic, a governor, I should mention his name, he's been a minister, when he was a governor, I went to speak in his state. They were having a job summit. And he was whispering to somebody, all this grammar way, this professor, they speak, sir. The only business that exists today is politics. So for many of these guys, it is the arena of business. We should make politics so unattractive that only people who want a place in history should go there. So that these people will pull their car, pull everything, sit down and say, how do we solve the problems of our society? And you can collaboratively solve those problems. We're talking about education earlier. An example I used in Abeokuta when I spoke at the inauguration lecture for the Ogun State governor now was Eastern region and Western region education. Western region surged ahead in education with free education. Eastern region wanted to repeat the same thing when Zeke moved from west to east. The civil service said to Zeke, Eastern region cannot afford this education, free education that you are trying to bring here. And it led to a ruckus. But in the end, what happened? When the civil service in Eastern region, led by the young permanent secretary at the time, Chief Jerome Udoji in finance, did the numbers, they found that they could not do what Western region did with the revenues they had from Kuku. And they suggested an alternative. Let people pay school fees for primary 1 and for primary 5. Zeke thought it was an assault on his promise to the people. And it led to a ruckus. But guess what? Everybody sat down and found a creative way around it. And so they worked with the missionaries, worked with the communities, make community contributions, And education took off in the Eastern region and enabled them a leapfrog. And that's what we need are entrepreneurial leaders. Like, this get FAC account and pay salary and this won't work. It will lead to a bloody revolution in this country because the resources are not there and people are getting poorer and angrier. But if you have creative governors who sit down, know that the budget really comes to nothing, and find ways of creating the context that investment will come into certain areas, people feel, I mean, the Forbes report, it's been there for everybody to see. When people like me talk about it, they say you complain too much. But it's been there for years. You come into Nigeria, you make an investment, some government agency makes a policy, you're dead in the water. And they think people who have lost money, when they go away, won't tell their friends out there. We need a mindset change in people, in the civil service, in politics. And
perhaps in business too.
In business, oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, in one of the examples I give you in another book, not this current book, Rajat Rasaki was my friend when he was governor in Lagos. Chamber of Commerce has a meeting. They decide on some things. They send a delegation to go and meet the governor. And they get to the meeting. People are more interested in asking for land allocation in Lekki. So when I went to see him in the evening, I said, how did my people come from Chamber of Commerce? He said, your people, go and don't mind them when they came here. How do we change this mindset? How do we create a service culture? You know, it's me, myself, and I, part of the collapse of culture in Nigeria, is what has kept us where we are. Somebody says I'm a closet socialist. This is not socialism, this is common sense. The common good, the Africans always said, Ubuntu, I am because we are.
I like that proverb. Is it Greek that a society grows great when men plant trees, knowing they will not enjoy the shade?
Absolutely.